Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OTD Military History. Today, we're going to be doing a AMA, basically, but not just with me. Today's guest is Michael Akkerman, who is, I'm calling him an expert on Omaha Beach because he is a historian, filmmaker, artist. He's got a lot on the go, way more than me. And I don't know how he does it all, but he does. So what we're going to do is I have a few questions. We'll start off. A few that I had come in from some supporters last night. And then we'll just do AMA from there. So any questions related to Omaha, feel free. So we'll just get into it. And I got questions. So I got quite a few questions for somebody who's got all this expertise on Omaha. So, hey, Michael, thanks for coming on and joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me, Brad. I really appreciate it.
Well, of course, the pleasure is all mine. Always been wanting to have somebody on do American beaches in general. So it's good to obviously start with the big dog in the room, I guess, with Omaha. I mean, I have some videos on my channel that deal with Omaha, and it's a lot of questions, a lot of myth,
a lot of questions.
Oh yeah, I got nothing but I keep finding you get more questions, and I keep finding answers. So before we kind of get into that, as a lot of my viewers know, I like to start off by asking, why are you so into Omaha Beach and doing, again, you can see the art behind you there, all the different things you do with it, which is amazing to do all these ways of looking at it. I mean, I'm jealous of the talent, but I'm just always curious, personally, why you're so interested in this one.
Well, thank you for that intro, Brad. I don't know why, like, particularly that thing. It's just something that since I think, like, a lot of us, we get an interest for this thing at a very young age.
Yeah.
You kind of know that you're into these subjects when you're like a kid and such like that. I think that your childlike, curiosity and stuff like that kind of grabs hold of it, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. And I just remember as a kid, growing up in the time that I did, the late 90s, early 2000s, obviously Saving Private Ryan had come out, and then all of the Medal of Honor video games that I grew up with and such. And I just kind of was always into that stuff. And there we go.
There we go.
I think that it's just that, one of those things to where I've always been fascinated by it and wanted to know more about it. And the more I learn about it, the more interesting it becomes, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's way deeper layers to this sort of thing. Talking about like how the German defenses were set up, or how they, set up their weaponry and all that stuff, and what was actually there, comparing that to what most people think, which is what's depicted in media and such like that. So a lot of it really is further understanding this stuff, and then myth busting as well, because I want the reality of it and the truth to be far more mainstream than it actually is. And when I've started really researching, like, I noticed that the stuff that was all of this, this really interesting, intricate, detailed stuff that I was unearthing was kind of difficult to find, and it was, a lot of it wasn't even in English and stuff. So it was like, well, I want this to be, more, I want people like who are interested in this stuff like myself to have a easier understanding of it, and just, be able to reach out and grab it, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's preaching the choir here. That's what I try to do. And questions that I have, right, or things I've never, you read about 1,000 times and you've never seen, or can't get it in all of that. But I mean, it's fascinating of all of this. But the one thing it's interesting, and then one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on today, though, is you haven't been to this thing. I mean, I can't judge. I'm not judging. I did my dissertation for my PhD in Hong Kong. Never been anywhere near it, so I can't judge. But I mean, you've set up a GoFundMe for that. So I've linked it down below if people want to help support you, because
yes,
I definitely am behind supporting you, because I just know your work will get better. Because I've been to Omaha myself twice now in the different parts. And
you're lucky.
That. There's lots going on there. And there's lots to break down and go into. But if people want to check that out, that would be fantastic.
You told me that you put the link down in the description, so I appreciate that. Yeah, this year I'm changing that, where I've already raised money. A number of people have already helped, so I really appreciate everyone who's already donated to that. It's just that, I'm not made of money, and so I've never been able to fund a trip to actually go to Europe.
Yeah.
So, I am using a lot of my own money for it, but I just need as much help as I can get. So I really appreciate it if you would, if anyone would, want to contribute, that's great. I really appreciate it. Or just spread the word or whatever. But you're right. I've never, ever been able to go there. But thankfully, in this day and age, when you got the internet, you got Google Earth and stuff like that. I mean, and then you got people over there who that you make connections with via Facebook or email or whatever. You can learn a lot about it, and I've been able to do that. It's just you also just have to be a super intricate detail freak nerd, and that also helps. But so I embrace my nerdism when it comes to this. But yeah, I've never been able to go there. But this year, I really, really, really want to change that. So it's like I need to finally get there.
Yeah, I mean, I went last year spring, as we were talking about. And the only way I was able to do was with airplane miles. It's the only way I was able to get there.
That was the only way. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just so expensive. Anyway, so yeah, if you guys can support Michael, that'd be fantastic, because we can get someone who knows the topic, get there and get their work to be better. Because going there is the difference. I mean, it just makes all the difference in the world. So I can speak to that myself. So good segue there just for a second ago was the nerdiness, because one of the questions I had was about some of the naming practices. What I want to ask you, again, this is the archive nerd in me, is, have you dug down into that level for Omaha, how these things came to be, and how the planning of this particular beach went? Was there anything that stuck out to you? Have you got any digging into the archives on any of that good stuff?
Well, it's interesting. You talking about the German defenses and
No, I was going to talk about the Americans and then the Germans. So I'm wondering things why certain draws were picked. Is it a thing to do with geography, or was there more to it?
From what I can see, it's that when it comes to with Omaha Beach, I've never really, I've heard various things said about it, but there's a lot of different things also, and the thing is about a lot of historians is that a lot of people inject their opinions. I mean, everyone does. It's, but then it also leads to a lot of conflicting things sometimes. But that area right there, kind of like also with Utah Beach, it's a very open kind of strip that's, that pretty much is easy. Not, I want to say easy, but it's open to actually landing, whereas opposed to a lot of the other parts in that area are cliffs, as you've been there. Yeah. It's a lot of chalk cliff and stuff like that. So you have these open bay kind of areas, and it's a 5-mile strip. So I think that's what attracted them to want to choose that location is, okay, well, that place can be, utilized to land a force. And also if you go way farther east, then you have Utah Beach, which is kind of the same thing, a very flat, open area, as opposed to the big Norman cliffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I climbed up one of them, the back way. Get some footage that I linked in the description as well, if people haven't seen that, because I covered a story that I'd never heard of before until, it was about a year ago now. It's digging into it. So the question that I had, and why I'm asking that is, and I wonder this myself, is when you're looking at the maps, because I did a lot of digging on the maps, because as a lot of people know, I'm a map nerd, almost probably too much. People who said I was probably a staff officer in my other previous life, which feels
right on.
So this is a question I had. I could never find an answer, and you seem like the right person to get it for us, or even an idea. It was asked from Rob Crane, actually does the COP survey. So the pre-landing small subs get in there, check the sand, soil, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
He asked, there was an E1, E3, D1, D3. Was there ever E2 or D2 draws?
No. I don't know why that kind of numeral system is the way it is. I mean, obviously E is, is in the alphabet, like D for dog, and then, and E for easy and stuff like that. I don't know why they're numbered that way. Maybe there was some kind of, system at some point early on where they were choosing different numbers. I honestly have no idea, because you have D1, D3, E1, E3, and then F1. And F1 is the one on the very far east. And I don't know why they skipped number 2 in that. It's a little, it's a little strange.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been able to find an answer, and I dug into, not heavy into the archives, but official histories and things like that. I couldn't find any.
I'll have to look into that one, because I've never been able to find an answer to that.
Yeah, and I was always wondering, it makes sense of the numbering system based upon the sector, right? Easy and dog, but
right,
wasn't really sure about the numbering. Anyway, so I want to go back again about the German planning, or planning, I guess, of the defense. It looked at, have you looked at a lot of their intricate details into the planning, because I wanted to talk about this kind of a little bit at length, because due to a certain film that you already mentioned, people think Omaha looked one way when it looked nothing like that in reality.
Yeah, nothing like that at all.
With daily, which is annoying.
Right. Well, it really depends. A lot of people do ask me this question where they're like, okay, well, you say that Saving Private Ryan's inaccurate. So what was it really like? It's like, okay, one thing you have to understand is that Omaha Beach is 5 miles long. So it's more like, what part of Omaha Beach do you want me to talk about? Because if you're talking about Saving Private Ryan, well, it says in the opening Dog Green sector. Okay, so it's weird because that's supposed to be Dog Green sector, but the second Rangers actually landed on Charlie sector, and there's supposed to be second Rangers in the movie. So it's kind of really, if you're going to be choosing like Dog Green or like Dog White, that would be fifth Rangers. But so it gets really hairy with that. So the German defenses in that movie, that is sort of like WN-70, which is overlooking Dog Green sector. But again, it's completely fictional. But no, I've researched every single Widerstands nest thoroughly. So when it comes to each one, they're all unique in their own way. But one really interesting thing about all of them is that every single one of them was really under construction, up in D-Day. So none of them were complete. Right.
And I think that's a part that I think is not known. I know that's not generally known, that they're not finished. Because I did want to ask about that, because you said they're all unique.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people might know why that's the case. I was wondering if you could maybe just talk about that, if you can, broadly, because I know there's a lot of factors that went into that.
Right. Well, the Germans, they started forming the Atlantic Wall in 1942. And at that point, it was completely different. If you've watched any of my episodes with Paul Woodage, we go into that. The actual names for all of these nests were different in 1942, but in 1943, then they changed to what we now refer to them as, WN 70, 71, whatever, But when they first started, it was a much more open, simplistic, and a lot less concrete.
Right.
So you see in 1942, there's like anti-tank guns just sitting out in open positions, kind of like a miniature kettle pit, or, they would have them in those ring stand positions, like the AT guns that could swivel, or they would just have, field guns sitting out on a concrete platform or just out in the open. Now, in late 1943, the Starten program is passed by Adolf Hitler. And that's where every gun then at this point, because of all of the Allied bombing that had been taking place, they're like, okay, all of these guns now need to be protected. Yeah. So in late 1943 and early 1944, that's when you start to actually see the bunkers get built around these guns. Right. So, you have like the R667 at WN65. That was constructed for those AT guns because of that, because it was like, okay, we're not having guns out in the open anymore. We have to have them inside bunkers. So those big casemates, that's all a post 1942, 1943, early 1944 thing. Right. And that's, because of all of the crap that was going on with, depleted assets and all that stuff, a lot of that stuff didn't get complete. So you do still have guns out in the open by June 6, 1944.
Yeah. I mean, that's one that I think drives me the most crazy is that people don't realize it's not this. I don't know what people expect, honestly. Yeah. Like they expect some sort of, I don't know, like a video game. It's the solid wall of, I don't know, bunkers or something.
That is what they expect.
I guess.
I mean, if I may for a second, I mean, it's because people have this inherent, they see things with a narrative. Everyone sees a narrative when they look at history or something like that. And people love to pin the story of the underdog to everyone. So it's like, the Americans, they're landing on the beach, but they're facing this formidable force. That's what they want in their brain, because they want to build a narrative on it. And a good narrative is the underdog narrative, the guys going up against the big, unstoppable force, but pulling through. So that's what I think, just that natural instinct to do that in people.
Yeah, actually, that's a good way of putting it. I think I've seen that a lot. With wasn't going to do this, but I guess I have to do comparisons to other beaches as well, right?
Yeah.
because I have a video that looking at what's the only footage we have of the assault phase that survived really from inside a landing craft or smaller landing craft. Is the one at Juneau. And people are like, well, they're walking out, blah, blah, blah. Omaha, every landing craft was peppered with machine guns. I said, well, if that was true, it would have failed. But anyway, that's one that drives me crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you see all these crazy myths and what people think is reality and what they want it to be and all this stuff. And the one, I want to come back to it, but the comparisons to Utah to me are fascinating. But I do want to come back to that because I don't know, because they're both American beaches, they get lumped together as the same, which drives me a little nuts. But
yeah, Utah is a weird thing, man. If you really want to get into that,
yeah, we could maybe touch on that a little bit later. But sure. I do want to get some of the questions actually from the audience because they're starting to.
Sure.
I mean, this was a good one because it came from Dave Patterson, who's been on our channel, good supporter. What do you know? Was there maybe extensive planning documents or a plan of what the defenses may have looked like if they had 3 to 6 more months to finish them at Omaha?
So there aren't any German actual blueprints, if that's what the word you want to use for the nests. Really, this was the combined effort of Organization Tote and the actual soldiers that were stationed there. Right. And it was some kind of clashing too, because Organization Tote, they're trying to do things way more by the book. They're trying to use regal bow and stuff like that. And that's their way of thinking. Whereas the guys stationed there, they're like, I don't care about that. I just care about what is going to keep me alive. Yeah. So just let's build something that, works. And it's like, well, that's not an actual approved bunker plan. I don't give a crap, So there's a lot of stuff like that, but there aren't any actual overlays of plans that you can actually see. However, if you study aerial photographs, you can see where certain things would end up eventually. So do you know at WN65 how they have that R667 bunker with the 5 centimeter anti-tank gun in it? At WN62, the famous WN62 that has the R699 bunkers that are facing west. Well, on the eastern side of that nest, 2 R667 bunkers were going to eventually be there.
Okay.
Yeah. Now they had a 5 centimeter gun set up in one of their trenches. And right next to that trench, if you look at the aerial photos, you can see the outline of where they were clearing the ground for one of those R667s, where they hadn't even started it yet, but they were about to. Okay. And the same thing when you go a little bit farther back, a little bit to that position's right, there was another 5 centimeter gun there, and you can also see another outline with the enfilading wall. So for WN62, they plan to have 4 casemates on it, 2 of the R699s facing west, and then 2 of the R667s facing east. So that's something you can see when you study these aerial photographs. Like, oh, okay, so I can see where they were going with this, And the same thing with my last episode on Paul Woodidge's show talking about WN65. Yeah. Those R667 casemates, the one that was facing west wasn't finished at all. It was just kind of, a shell. But you can see on the R667, the one that was finished, you can see it has these layers of bitumen coating all over it, that black substance, And that means that they were planning on burying it into the actual mountain, so you couldn't see it at all. Yeah. So it's little clues like that where you can say, okay, I can see what their plan was, but there aren't, unfortunately, other than some vague, testimonies and stuff like that from Franz Guckel and people like that.
Oh, yeah.
There aren't any actual blueprints that I've come across where showing how they're building, because they didn't do it that way. They were just they were digging the trenches, looking at the geography, saying, okay, it makes sense to do it this way. And they also have manuals where they're showing how to build these positions, and I have a number of those.
Right.
But not right. And so they're going off stuff like that. They're not actually drawing out these blueprints, And again, it's clashing with Organization Tote, who are trying to do things very much by the book by introducing regal bow casemates and stuff, and then they're building improvised stuff like these improvised pillboxes at WN71 and WN72, those kind of ones that are shaped like that. Yeah, those are completely just improvised. They're not they don't follow any kind of bunker plan that was approved in Berlin.
Yeah, because I was gonna say because what I did is I found in Normandy sometimes you get lost, but it makes it better. I went down. Well, I wasn't really lost. I just turned earlier than I had planned to because I thought it would be too busy, so I didn't want to get stuck. Anyway, so I went down and I came down further east than I had planned. So I went much further down the beach, and you can just, the ones that have been preserved, nothing looks the same. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's that narrative. I think I'm going to steal that from you. Is this idea of what people have, and then when you go on the ground, it's nothing like that. Even what's left, it's
nothing like that, man.
It's nothing like that at all. There's no uniformity. There's none of it. The positions are all in different places.
Yes.
Which is something I did want to move to because we have a question. See, I like my good segues here.
Go for it.
Here it is. It's about minefields, which is actually something I did want to ask about.
Okay.
We've seen minefield used to great effect in Ukraine, and I read that the Americans never had encountered such large minefields. Were mines employed in great number by the Germans at D-Day? I can speak to Omaha specifically, and I can answer some of the other ones after that.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Now, there are a number of photographs taken after D-Day that show various bundles of French M1936 mines. So I've seen a number of photos taken around Omaha. I could pull them up if you want to, where they're using the French M1936 mines rather than like the German Teller mines and stuff like that. Right. So that's kind of interesting, is that a lot of, I've talked a lot about this with other people, that a lot of French stuff kind of has popped up in terms of what the Germans were using, and mines were one of them. I see those M1936 mines in a few photos. However, I've also seen photographs of American engineers around the D1 exit of Omaha Beach where they're taking out S mines, the Bouncing Bettys, taking those out. And according to a lot of American testimonies around the E1 draw between WN64 and WN65, that minefield, which I think was MF39 was the name for it, was very dense, and there's a lot of instances where guys were getting blown up through there. A lot of S mines. People have described. I think it was Harley Reynolds described seeing a number of S mines pop up and blow up around that area. So S mines seem to be another one, along with the French M1936 mines, and of course, you are going to get a number of other kinds of German Teller mines, but then stock mines are another one that the Germans used a lot along the coast, which is a stick. It's just a stake sticking in the ground, and it has this explosive up on top, and it has a string attached to it, kind of like a Bouncing Betty, but it doesn't pop out of the air. So you do see stock mines also. What's really interesting about minefields, though, along Omaha Beach, is that they're not. I don't know. For people, when they think of minefields, I think they think of like an acreage of these things.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And you can see actually the patterns in aerial photographs where these minefields were set up, especially after D-Day, because they've cleared them out. Yes. So you can see the holes where they dug them out. And they're what they are. They're actually like in strips. They're like, a strip of mines that's only 4 deep. So it's like maybe 4 mines deep, but it goes for a long time. So it's not this big acreage of mines. It's really just this kind of road almost of mines. And that's really all you need as a deterrent to stop people, or to stop vehicles. And that's its purpose. It's not necessarily to kill people. I mean, if that's what it's going to do if they go into it, it's really a deterrent. It's the same thing with obstacles. They're not meant to kill people. They're just meant to slow them down and stop them. So then the soldiers can kill them. And
well, it's about creating kill zones. Which they did to great effect at many parts of the beaches. And just again, at that part there at the bottom about used in great numbers by the Germans at D-Day. Yes, the answer is yes. Throughout all the beaches, used on Teller mines, especially, are used in what becomes the high water marks to take out the landing craft. Those are on every beach. Same with Juno. I'm just thinking about the Juno thing. Sorry, the strip. That's throughout Bernays and Courseulles-sur-Mer. It's the same thing, literally. It's not very wide, but it's long.
Yeah. Now one interesting thing too, though, is that when it comes to these, and this is different for a few other places, but I'm talking solely about Omaha Beach here. They didn't have mines on the beach. They would have all been beyond that, the shingle embankment, what's called the high beach area. They would have all been past that. They wouldn't actually have been mines buried in the sand. Yes. The only time you would have mines on the beach would be on some of the obstacles, like the median foul posts, which is the stake with the teller mine on top of it. Or, if the hem bulk ramps, those big log ramps, they would put mines on top of those sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all the time. But those were the only times you actually have mines on the beach. You wouldn't have them buried in the sand.
Yeah. Well, it just makes me laugh because that same footage of the Canadians landing, someone put a comment like literally on a video just the day before I was literally on the beaches. And they're like, why didn't the landmine go off when they step off the boat? I'm like, you've never been on a beach, have you? It would stay in one place, right? Especially here where these tides are wild.
Oh, yeah.
These tides are no joke. Things wouldn't stay in place, so they have to be on something else.
They wouldn't stay in place, and they deteriorate after a while.
Going off all the time, or doing nothing, or corroding, or whatever. So I just thought that was so interesting that people misunderstand these things in a lot of ways. I'm not really
sure. Oh, absolutely.
TV and movies, I'm sure is the reason, but it's another one to think about. And this, that's great questions, but I don't want to forget this one, is because you study this very well. How do I say this? When does Omaha Beach stop for you? You know what I mean? Is it just a D-Day thing? Is it a geographic thing for you? Like, I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that, because that area is fascinating, and behind the beach as well. I mean, there's a lot to look at back there.
Yeah, so it's like, basically you're saying like how, like the sector wise, like how far is it? Yeah.
So what to you in your mind, what does that mean? You know what I mean? If that makes
sense. I'm currently doing maps for all of the villages right now around, Vierville, St. Laurent, and Colville, and how they were in 1944. And so I think that, past those villages is really where it would stop in terms of, the actual area, because the Germans who are stationed, on those resistance nests along the beach are also stationed within those areas, those farm fields, those towns and stuff like that. So, and the fighting continued after they got off the beach on D-Day and into June 7th. So it's like all of that area, I consider that, Omaha Beach. And also, I also consider, parts of like WN59 that's much further east. Even that's technically part of Omaha Beach, and even Point de Hawk, if you want to talk about that, because that's still Point de Hawk is actually in the Omaha sector.
Yep. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't want to do it, but you did. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I just because it's just so fascinating to me. The reason I was thinking about that is because the role artillery plays at Omaha Beach, which I don't think, again, is another thing that is very, and I don't even mean just generally with the general population. I think historians have kind of downplayed the role that artillery played.
The 352nd, they had all their batteries, pulled way back, and those were all hitting Omaha Beach. So yeah, absolutely. And I don't have them memorized, but I have been able to pinpoint where all of those batteries were set up. I don't have them memorized in terms of the locations, but I did put them on a map. Okay. So yeah,
I might want to take a look at that if you don't mind at some point, because there's some video I did a while back that just made me think of that. Is because his description, he literally wrote about it. Major Stanley Bach, he lands for the 1st and 29th intermingle, and it becomes a huge mess.
Right. I have a couple photos of them.
Yeah. Well, that's all he talks about is the artillery all day long. He's like, this is what's doing us. This is what's killing us. It's the artillery.
Yeah.
And you don't hear that very often.
And like I say, would have continued on June 7th as well.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. His notes, anyway, I did a video, it's linked down below. His notes kind of confusing where it ends. Some of it might have been the next day or recorded the next day. Hard to say. Right. But okay. I want to pull back out for a second, because this is a question that I don't even know. I don't know if there is an answer. Maybe you do.
Let's see.
Why Omaha? Why is it called Omaha? And this is a good point from Scott here. Again, lots of support for the channel. Things in Sicily are colors, right?
Right. Yeah. So there was a name for it before Omaha, and I forgot what it was, but it was chosen as just random, because they had chosen a different name for it. And I think there were also debates on calling it Arkansas, if I remember. There was another state that they were thinking of calling it. And it was a random thing. It was like, well, we have to call it something. So Omaha. And gold, Juno, and sword. That's more of like, I think I'm not sure about that. You probably know more about that one. But for Utah, for Utah and Omaha, it was. I wish I knew off the top of my head what states they were considering. And I think at some point, I think they were just called like beach green and beach red or something like that in the early stages. Yeah.
Like when it was Cossack had started the planning before Schaaf was created. I believe they're colored names.
Yes.
I could be misremembering, but I don't think so.
There
wasn't as many either, so there was less. So
they were at some point, but I think it was Arkansas was one of the names they were considering for Omaha.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's just so interesting that these things we don't really know. We don't. The same with the British Canadian beaches. We're not really sure.
Right.
The whole Jelly Beach thing. There's no proof of that.
Yeah.
You don't want your son to have died on Jelly Beach. There's no
one interesting thing I can tell you is that the Americans misunderstood the name Pointe du Hoc, and they thought it was Pointe du Hoc. You might have heard that. So on all of the maps, it's written as Pointe du Hoc. So yeah, and like even in after action reports, guys refer to it as that, who are like on Omaha Beach, we had to go link up at Pointe du Hoc. So it's you have to think of it like back then during World War II, that's what these soldiers would have been calling it.
Yeah, probably would have called it that anyway, to be honest. To be completely honest with you. So this is a bit of a bigger question. Do you think Omaha was adequately planned given the topography they were facing? Did Americans succeed there because of planning or in spite of it?
No, I think it was a success. I mean, yeah, it started off poorly. It started off badly. It started off rough, but ultimately, I mean, they got off the beach and they secured everything, And again, there's no real other place within that area between Utah Beach and what was it? Gold Beach is the next one. I'm sorry. And Gold Beach. I just off the top of my head, I was like, wait a minute. Oh no.
Yeah, do an alphabetical order from sword over. That's how I remember.
Right. Yeah. There's no real open bay like that between those two. So Omaha, that area, or La Plage du Or is the name of the actual location, was the best place for those guys to land. Yeah, it started off poorly, and that's another thing I've heard. It's like, oh, well, wasn't this a failure? Or wasn't this a big, conundrum? No, it wasn't. They succeeded. Yeah, people died. But that's part of the thing that happens in war. And that sounds cold and callous, but like people do die in war. There's no avoiding that.
Yeah. Well, we have a question that deals with that. The person asking said we'll save it for later. So I definitely want to, because I see that again myself is this planning. And another thing, and maybe we can, once we kind of broaden the discussion a little bit later, is like difficulty and which beach is worse or whatever. Right. There's just a lot going on there. But I mean, I can just say this generally, like the Normandy landings are some of the best planned operations in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
Like they've been working on this for a very long time with every little detail planned. Like it's wild that people, again, I don't think fully understand what that means of how this was planned. And Omaha is no different.
Right. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. Sorry, there's a few more little questions I want to get through here. Oh yes, this is a good one from Dave again. Didn't want to do two of his back to back. A book. Do you have any plans? Because he's saying your art is amazing. And,
thank you.
The defenses, and again, I mean, it visualizes for someone like me who can't do that in their head of what this stuff would look like. Do you have any plans like that in the future, or a project using that in some way?
I would love to. I proposed a while back a book idea called Omaha Beach, an Illustrated Invasion, where I was going to do just exactly that, but it was going to cover the whole history of the area, Omaha Beach, from like the beginning of the war to the end. And so it was going to show like what it was like in 1942, 1943, 1944, and then D-Day and all that. And I mean, an undertaking for something like that is a lot of work. That's a ton of work. So it's like, I would love to eventually do that, but it's so much work. I mean, I'm starting to go more into like digital stuff. I did digital pieces for Paul's episode, his last episode I was on. I usually do traditional painting and stuff. In fact, I have a piece I'm working on right there.
Right there. Yeah, we got a in live shot here.
Yeah, so that's a World War I commission. But I love doing traditional work, like painting and stuff like that. But I did some traditional mock-ups for that episode with Paul, just because I was like, crap, I can't do anything because it takes long, and I just need to whip something up. So I did some digital stuff, and everyone was like, wow, that's awesome. So I'm like, yeah, maybe I could do more digital stuff. It doesn't take as long. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, it seems, well, that's my opinion, but that's the way things are going anyway. So
right. So I would love to come out with a book, but for what I would want to do with it, because I wouldn't want to just do another Omaha Beach book. I mean, how many of those already exist? They're all on my shelf. And, it's like, I would want to do something unique. So I would love to do something with my art, that I do combined with the research that I do.
Yeah. Maybe we can figure something out. Well, this is interesting. So Dave said one online source says it was called X-ray due to the phenomena.
Oh, I think I've heard that somewhere too. Yeah.
Because I think it was the last beach when it was still Cossack, right? Utah had not been planned, if I remember correctly. I don't know. The Cossack plan was so early. I haven't looked at it.
Dude, I have to brush up on my on the behind the scenes stuff of planning and stuff like that. Oh, I'm so locked into the stuff right now anyway, from the German stuff and all of their defenses and things like that. But I used to know all this stuff off the top of my head. I need to, when it comes to the American stuff, I need to go back to that.
Well, the planning documents, they're planning documents for the planning documents that had to be planned with a document. It's great as historians, but it's so hard to remember what is done at what time.
Yeah, I don't remember it all. So, but you just got to keep going back and try to remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You don't have to write it down. Sorry. I just want to, well, speaking of that, while we're here, I don't know, maybe we know the answer, but have you ever looked at British Canadian beaches at all, and any similarity differences you've noted versus Omaha?
Yeah. One thing that's interesting when it comes to those, the Canadian beaches, is that some of their defenses are laid out a bit differently because they're more integrated into the villages that are there.
Oh yeah.
One second. Excuse me. Along Omaha Beach, you have the R667 bunkers for the 5-centimeter swivel guns, the KW39. And before those were in those casemates, they were in the ring stands that were down by the shingle. Now I think it's Gold Beach. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on this, but they have those same things there. But instead of taking them out and putting them in a casemate, they just put this giant piece of concrete over them.
Yeah.
You've probably seen that. Yeah. So that's kind of a unique thing, is that the ring stands for those 5-centimeter guns along those beaches have, instead of a casemate or, whatever, they just reinforced the ring stand by kind of building a semi casemate over it. So technically the gun is protected. It does follow the Sharton program of late 1943, but it's still in that swivel, that ring stand nest. So that's one thing that I have noticed about them. And then they also have the Zonder construction bunkers a lot. They have only one of those at WN72 of Omaha Beach, that double embouchure thing where the 5-centimeter gun can swivel back and forth. I forgot where they were, but there was a number of them over by the Vere River. I've seen a number of those, and then I think there was another one on Gold Beach, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look at it again. I have looked at. It's been a long time, but I was at one point also just researching those beaches as well. And then Utah, of course. Utah, I find, when it comes to their defense, is interesting because they have a lot more bigger casemates along Utah than what's along Omaha, but there were not nearly as many troops there. I do want to talk about Utah maybe in a few minutes. I just want to get some of these because they are an interesting way to think about them. And this leads me something I want to add to this is we have another question put in. I like counterfactuals. I mean, who amongst us doesn't like a good pub talk? Americans almost lost at Omaha. I mean, we can talk about that. But if the Germans had won there, what happens next? And this leads me to questions about the closing of certain sectors because we have a little bit of a look into what that actually looked like. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think it makes a major difference if, say, Omaha goes completely horribly wrong. I mean, Utah fails correctly. What's that meme? Task failed successfully, like because they land in the wrong spot technically for a lot of them, and it works out better. Juneau's a tough fight, so a sword, but they end up working out, and they can land a bunch of troops through there anyway, and then you can push this out to another one. The Mulberry Harbor gets destroyed in the American sector anyway, and everything comes through Armonge regardless. So I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, I don't think it'd be horrible, like we talked about the human cost, but I don't think it. I mean, I don't think it makes much of a difference.
No, it doesn't, because if you have the other successful landings at Utah and then Gold and then the other beaches, those are eventually going to create a pocket around that. Yeah. If I mean, the Germans are going to have to pull out no matter what. So I don't really see that as being the case once all those beaches have been successful. Like I say, if Omaha was the one that didn't go properly, and then all the Americans from that had to go on to Utah and then Gold as well. I mean, those Germans are eventually just going to get put in this double envelope that they're not going to be able to get themselves out of.
I mean, that happens in small pockets in Omaha anyway. So it literally happens. Parts of the sectors are closed to traffic anyway for most of the day. That's something I wanted to ask you about, if you've looked into that much. Because I'm becoming more and more interested in the Navy documents and the Coast Guard documents. Yeah, stuff on both of those services. And it's just a fascinating thing. I wonder if there's anything that sticks out to you from the Navy perspective or naval perspective.
Well, what's interesting about the Navy documents is that I've looked at a lot of their maps and some of their AARs and stuff like that. Unfortunately, one thing that people do like to talk about when it comes to Omaha Beach is when the naval guns turned and the ships turned and they fired their guns at the beach and stuff like that. The one thing that people don't think about is that actually caused Americans to die as well. I mean, especially in Colville-sur-Mer, the bell tower there that got hit by, I think it was the USS Harding, and that killed a number of people in Joe Dawson's unit, who were around there. And the same thing in Vierville. It was also the USS Harding that hit the bell tower. And the reason why they would do that is because they thought that the Germans were using those as observation or forward observers. In most cases they weren't, though. But Vierville, they were not. They were not using that. The one in Colleville did have I forgot what this device is called, but it's like a light a receiver sort of thing where you can send Morse code back and forth. And there was one of those in the bell tower that was going back and forth with another one that was at WN62. So that wasn't, they weren't an observation bunker, but it wasn't an observation post, but it was like a communication line.
Yeah, like a signal post. Yeah.
But for Vierville, that bell tower was destroyed, and there weren't any Germans using it, and it killed some people. I think it was some French people, and I think one or two Americans as well. So that's one thing that I remember this documentary I reacted to not too long ago. I reacted to this D-Day, and they mentioned the ships doing that, and they're like, for the troops on the beach, it's a moment of relief. It's like, no, that was freaking terrifying. Scary. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine 5-inch naval shells screeching overhead and then exploding around you? I mean, that is terrifying.
Yeah, especially from that range. It's close.
Oh yeah, it's really close. It's direct fire basically. But what I've been trying to get when it comes to the Americans' perspective, what I've always been really interested in too are the Navy guys who are on Omaha Beach, like the 6th and the 7th Naval Beach Battalions. Yeah. The what's it called? Demolition teams who were destroying the beach obstacles, and stuff like that. So those guys I find interesting. And one thing that's interesting to note too is that once the battle for Omaha Beach was over, those guys were done. They wouldn't be going inland or anything. Like I think the 6th and 7th Naval Beach Battalions were disbanded after D-Day because it was like, they're done,
Makes sense to me. I mean, they fulfilled the role and they can be used for elsewhere for other things. Right. Yeah. Just point I want to make, it's an excellent point, and Dave, who is a historian and also combat veteran, would know if Omaha fails, then U.S. follow forces landed Gold in Utah and then link up.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds awful, but that's the thing you have to differentiate sometimes, right? Is you have to take the strategic level view, as I like to say.
Yeah. But,
kind Gotta take that even all been done of it, right?
Going back to what I say though, again, like people love to do these narrative sort of things. People love like this what if sort of thing, which I tend to not do. I just tend to focus on what happened.
Yeah,
and right, yeah, and it's like you say, well, what if this happened? Well, what if it happened? It didn't. So what?
Yeah. You know? I make a joke. I'm like, yeah, what if Godzilla showed up? I mean, it didn't happen either. So what difference does it make? But it's a fascinating one. There's one about the Panzer divisions. Panzer divisions are not involved really.
No.
Over here, that's more
thing. When it comes to Omaha Beach, the German 352nd, their artillery, they did have like martyrs in their within their unit, so you would see some of like the martyr self-propelled guns, which they're not tanks, but like they kind of look like tanks. You know, they're an artillery piece mounted on a tracked vehicle. So there are photos of those things taken out around Omaha Beach. So people say, "Oh, what if the tanks showed up?" It's like, well, they did have tracked vehicles with big guns on them, and that didn't make a difference.
Well, they fired different rounds. So anyway,
right? Yeah,
it's not what a tank destroyer is meant to do.
Exactly.
So actually, I do want to talk about now, because there's a question that leads to this, is I want to talk about the Omaha, Utah thing, because I see so many people conflate them. They're one in the same. Like people think all of Omaha look like Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Which is not true.
Yeah.
But they think Utah look like Saving Private Ryan as well. And I wonder if you've looked at that as well in comparison and why Utah is more successful, quote unquote, right? Because everybody just looks at casualty numbers,
right?
In that terms, because I think people just have such a thing in their head, whereas Utah is not that at all.
No, Utah is, that when the fourth ID landed, even though they didn't land in the exact space they were supposed to, they were able to get off easily because, the German unit there, it was not nearly as reinforced, and it was also a lot of Osttruppen. A lot of like the Georgian guys were there and stuff like that. And so it's not really defended by, Omaha Beach. You have the static 726 regiment, but then you also have, the 352nd Infantry Division that came in to reinforce that. So you have a lot more firepower and a lot. I mean, it's not like, again, it's not this grand, elite. People love to use the word elite. Elite unit, but right? Yeah, it was still more Germans than it was still more enemy combatants that were there rather than Utah Beach. Also, Utah Beach, the geography is completely different. It is flat as a pancake. If anyone has ever seen it, it is not the escarpment that Omaha Beach is famous for at all. It's very flat. It's like you get off the beach and then it's just flatness. And that's what I've pretty much been able to determine when it comes to, and I haven't studied it nearly as much as I have with, Omaha Beach, but it's just that the geography was a lot easier, and there weren't nearly as many dedicated, enemy combatants there to face the Americans.
Well, well, I think to me, in my understanding of it, is the geographic difference of the topography is the layout is massive.
Yeah. Now you do have some large bunkers there. You do have some, large stuff, but not a whole lot of like, not tons of anti-tank guns, not a lot of enfilading fire, fields of fire and stuff like that. Not a lot of machine gun bunkers, not a lot, because like Omaha Beach, you have a lot of improvised machine gun bunkers at every WN. Not a whole lot of that at Utah. Not a lot of space for that sort of thing at Utah.
Yeah, actually something, I want to jump off that real quick, is because I've been working on a small little video about some sites I did. And one thing I've noticed is people seem to think that what's left now is what it looked like. Have you noticed that as well? Like the WNs were massive. I mean, in comparison to what's left, and much more intricate and detailed, which you obviously know. But I just think that's something that's so interesting that people don't quite understand.
Yeah, it's what people see is what that's what they want to go to, is what they see. And this is another thing that I get into. I don't want to say debates with, but I roll my eyes at different depictions. Like you see in movies. Again, we'll go back to Saving Private Ryan, for example. Yeah. So they have in Saving Private Ryan the big iconic bunker overlooking the Schnabel stand, which is that open aperture kind of thing, and which is mostly used for observation, not machine gun emplacement. It could be, and also, but it wasn't being used after 1942, after the Tobruk was introduced as a machine gun emplacement. But so for example, that bunker in the movie, it's just this big cement, thing sitting out in the open. Well, why isn't it painted? Why isn't it buried? Why doesn't it have camouflage nets and branches all over it? That's the thing. These German bunkers, they would camouflage the hell out of them. And if they weren't camouflaged, it's because it was still under construction.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Yeah.
Well, I think that's why it's so interesting about going there and seeing this, because there's artillery positions encased behind. I went to the picture I shared earlier on YouTube and on social media of the memorials to the 1st and 29th and the Braves, Le Brave Memorial. Yeah, there it's split between the two sectors.
Yeah,
there's off that draw. There's bunkers back in there, and those are dug in. Like it's fascinating. Yeah. And still today, there's not much you can do with them. The people, I think people who own one of the chunks of land had like a flower pot on top of it. I just thought it was an interesting juxtaposition of this position of death, and then they have a flower on it. Those don't get looked at much. I think even from people when I was there, people were climbing all over the WNs, but nobody was going back in, which I thought was interesting, but I guess not surprising. I guess
right.
We're trying to say is there's more there than you think.
Well, also what people think is, the concrete positions have survived, obviously, but all of these WNs, they would have had tons of improvised positions. Pretty much all of the, I don't want to say all, most of the machine gun positions along Omaha Beach were improvised, buried log, bunkers that were buried in the ground. I did a little a depiction of that for Paul's show. I can show that if you'd like.
Sure, yeah, you can just show your screen if you like.
Yeah, 1 second here. So that's one thing that people, they don't really, they see the concrete and it's like, okay, well, that's what the Germans were using, right? It's like, well, actually, a lot of these positions were improvised, like wooden log positions here. Let me show my screen. Share screen. Yes. Window. So I did this for his show, and it's depicting.
Just gotta add it on here.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah. So this is a cutaway drawing depicting what one of these underground machine gun pillboxes would have been like, and there were 2 of these. Or 3, one was facing east, 2 of them were facing west at WN 65. But when you look at aerial photographs and other photographs along Omaha Beach, there was at least one of these at every WN.
Yeah.
These kind of pillboxes. Also, this is enfilading. This is not facing the beach right here. This is facing sideways. So he's shooting guys from their flank as they're coming off, way the hell down there. They're not just shooting directly towards the beach. But
that's so fascinating to me because that's something I loved to highlight when I was there taking the videos and stuff, the various places I went. Is look just literally where the hole is facing and which has the thickest amount of concrete.
Yeah.
Facing out to the beach. I mean, we had a question about this earlier of when we talked about a little bit the naval stuff, right? Like,
yeah.
The ineffectiveness, again, maybe I can ask you this in a second, of people have these weird questions about why things look the way they did even on the day. And I went, well, it's very hard to hit things with artillery shells.
Yes.
They're tiny. So but they're facing the other way because you would be blown to bits even if you're nowhere near it because the shrapnel would get you. So to me, it's a fascinating thing to keep thinking and keeping in mind of what people are talking about. And because it comes up because of the houses and stuff, which is another thing too.
Oh, yeah. Well, another thing, when you look at a lot of aerial photographs taken before D-Day, like a lot of aerial reconnaissance, and if you look at maps that the Americans and the British have taken, there's a lot of places where they'll circle something and they'll say question mark, like they're not sure what it is. And that's good because it's all camouflaged. The Germans don't want them to see this stuff.
Yeah, which to me is fascinating. Because I don't know if you've come across this. Maybe we can talk about that real quick. Is I guess people expect it to be complete devastation. I don't understand it, to be honest. Because the people there's no houses on the Normandy coast on D-Day. I went, there's a lot of them.
There were a lot.
People living by the water in the 40s too. People it's not. It's not a modern thing, right? So it's just so interesting how people tend to think about this. So. It's not just me thinking this or having these problems.
I agree. I think it's that I don't know. Well, I mean, I know that when Paul Woodage, he asked Dale Dye, who worked as the consultant on Saving Private Ryan, which I'm sorry, Dale Dye doesn't know anything about Germans. He might know about Americans in Vietnam, but he doesn't know crap about the German side.
Yeah, we won't get into that.
During World War II. But apparently Paul told me that he asked Dale Dye one time, he's like, so why didn't you show all the houses that were on Omaha Beach? And he said, oh, it's because it wouldn't look scary or it wouldn't look imposing. It would be distracting or something. It's like, I mean, I don't know, like, but it's so funny because then they say stuff with that movie like, well, this is meant to show what it was really like. It's like, well, that's not how it really was. So what are you doing? So I hate stuff like that. Like people who try to say things like, well, it looks better for film, but then they say crap like, well, this is to show people what it really was. It's like, well, you're contradicting yourself, man.
Yeah, well, so you've done it, so you would know. So
yeah,
I just I didn't want to. Yeah, that stuff drives me crazy. Try not to think about it too much, but yeah, it's another fascinating one of looking at what's depicted and why and how they go about doing it in popular works.
Yeah,
but this is one I'm kind of saving for the end here. Is if we could talk about projected casualties versus actual casualties.
Mm.
And so just talk about that real briefly.
So I've heard mixed things when it comes to what they expected. I've heard them say that they were expecting, well, also you have to take this into consideration. Casualty does not mean death.
Yep.
It means wounded, missing, and dead. So it means, if someone's wounded, they're a casualty. If someone's missing but shows up somewhere way later, they were still listed as a casualty. So, because I've heard people say that, well, there were thousands of men killed there. It's like, well, there were thousands of casualties. Yes. There were not thousands of deaths, though. No. So that's one thing that I try to clarify when it comes to that. It's like, we need to, if you want to talk about the deaths are a different thing than just casualties. Casualties is much broader. But I've heard mixed things on what was the projected number of casualties on. I've heard it be like 1,000 or like 1,200 and such like that, which was around, how many people were actually killed and wounded on Omaha Beach on D-Day. The number of killed on D-Day is within 800. I think it's 861, maybe. Yeah, but 861 is how many were killed. And what I find interesting about that is that when you say that, people like I've had people get really upset about that, and it's because going back to this whole narrative thing, the word 1,000 is dramatic.
Yep.
So when
800 doesn't have it,
800 doesn't have it, but it's like, are you kidding me? 800 men to die in one day is still a lot of people.
A lot.
Yeah. So I mean, what are we doing here? But I don't think that Omaha exceeded the expected casualties that they thought.
Well, that's something we can talk about quick is you hear this all the time and about, what it was and the level of casualties. I mean, you did it with Woody, but the Heinz Severlo thing. So we don't want to talk about that because that's just, I don't understand that. Maybe we can ask in a minute, but I don't know why he stuck to that story because it makes literally zero sense. But the idea of this amount, like it just comes up so often, and people see it as like a badge of honor almost. I don't know. Some Americans, I've talked about it. They're like, this is, you're insulting America by saying that. I went, okay.
Explain how.
Yeah, like people just get so worked up about this stuff. But all of them every beach was under the estimates. They weren't even close.
No, not even. I mean, especially like Utah, man. I think only like
192.
Yeah, like it was like barely 200 people.
It wasn't 200, definitely under 200. I mean, it's just, you see that a lot. It's a fascinating thing to talk about. But the Heinz Severlo thing just drives me nuts. I'm sure it drives you up the wall.
Well, that's a whole thing right there. I mean, what I find interesting about Severlo is that Severlo. I've had people terrible. Yeah, I know. I had people gig me on that, being like, "That's not how you say his name." It's like, all right, man.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So Severlo, what's interesting about that is that I do believe that he was there. I believe that he was there, and perhaps I can believe that he probably fired his rifle and that he might have helped someone with a machine gun. I don't. And I am also like, he could possibly have, because he was part of the artillery. And when it comes to those artillery guns, they'd have 2 machine guns to guard those. And so it's like, I mean, I don't know, maybe Bernhard Frerking, his commander, he could have made some kind of decision like, well, give the gun to him, because since we go to the beach, as have an extra gun there at the beach or something. It could be something like that. But if you want to talk about like, he definitely did not kill thousands of people. I mean, if I was going to say, okay, let's just say that he did fire a machine gun on MG42.
Yeah.
I think he describes in his book one instance where because he would say he would switch between his rifle and that machine gun. And he describes at one point when he took his rifle, he shot an American and saw him. And he said that always haunted him. That would probably be his only confirmed kill.
Yeah.
I mean, they're way too far away to determine if he was hit, who he was hitting, and how many he killed. But like that instant where he said that he remembered that and it haunted him, that was probably his only confirmed kill, was that one guy.
There's this controversial statement. He's got 1 kill on each. I mean, well, I'm going to ask, because you've looked at this a lot more than anybody else I know. Why did he stick to this story? Was there a reason why?
Well, there's a couple different possibilities. There's one that goes with, and again, this is something that people don't like, but like there are veterans who lie. There are veterans who lie.
Say that all the time. Yeah.
So, and and I've come across other cases of that. But there's that. There's that whole thing. Another thing that there's another possibility is that Saverlow's story and him being this machine gunner, the Beast of Omaha and all that didn't really come around until the 1980s when German historian Helmut von Küsken found him. And Küsken is responsible. It's not mentioned in his book, but Heinrich Saverlow's book, WN62, was ghostwritten by von Küsken, and he was the one who was kind of like, you need to write this book. And if anyone knows von Küsken, they know that he was a terrible historian. He made up a bunch of crap, and is responsible for a lot of these myths and things like that. He has a whole separate book that he personally did on WN62, which I will admit does have a number of actual names in it that's really interesting. Like, that's the only place that we have those documented names. And you can see them because they're also in German documents, and there's photographs to accompany them as well. Yes. But a number of the things that he describes in the book that happened, I think, are complete BS. He talks about at one point the French resistance being in the bell tower, and that's why it was blown and stuff like that. He said that they shot it with a Panzerfaust, and it's like, what are you talking about? The Harding, the USS Harding did that. You can see it in its AAR report. So that's just one of many. So I think that when von Küsken got a hold of Saverlow, I mean, Saverlow at that point, he was in his I think he was in his 70s.
70s, late 70s? Yeah.
Yeah, or something like that. He was probably like 60 something. Yeah. And I think von Küsken was, kind of, putting this like, you are the Beast of Omaha. You killed all of these men and stuff like that. And he was probably just, I must have, and people also don't like to think that you can coerce people into that sort of thing, especially if they're at a certain age, or if they're, you can like that. Right. People can be coerced into doing that. So I think it's a combination of that. He's either completely lying and was completely making it up, or he was convinced by von Küsken that he was responsible for thousands of deaths, which is morbid as hell to put that on someone.
Well, it's very messed up, because I think you did something with Woody. I think it was around the anniversary last year. Talking about this, and then I watched some interviews and stuff with him afterwards, and he's like, "This is horrible. It's ruined my life."
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but it's so bad, but it's made up. So you're sticking to the story yourself. So maybe, it's external pressure that was doing it.
I think von Küsken is partial to blame for that. And that, again, that's really sad, because it's like, for this guy who is, clearly like a wereaboo, he's like a Wehrmacht fanboy. He's finding this old German and saying like, can you believe it? You killed all these men. You killed all these men. Isn't that cool? That's his mentality. And it's like, that is messed up, man. That is like really morbid to do that to someone.
Yeah, it's a crazy story that I think it's just another one of those ones I don't think we'll ever be rid of, no matter how much we say it's wrong and how much evidence we use.
Yeah.
Here it is. Here. So back to the defenses, back to kind of your bread and butter here. Maybe expand on this a little bit, but did the Germans base their defensive positions from experience in the First World War, or is it coming more from things like Sicily or the Italian mainland, or is it more recent?
No, when they first start out, it is based on just what has been written about how to do these kind of defenses. Like I said, when they first, when the Atlantic Wall is first established, they put all of their defenses down on the, like, right behind the shingle. They put it down, like, so it's like right on the beach, and then they would also put like an adjacent one, like the field guns and stuff, up on a plateau if there was a plateau, in terms of Omaha Beach, for example. But so that was how they initially planned it, and then in 1943 things changed, and that's when they decided, well, actually, that's when like the names of everything changed, and then the Sharton program happened, where it's like, okay, we want to put everything in casemates now. And so then that's when they said, we're going to take everything that's down on the beach, we're going to pull that back to overlook the beach rather than be directly down on it. So I haven't found evidence that they're based on anything, like any previous experience. It's just kind of what they feel was right at the time. And one interesting thing is that there are a number of armaments from the Maginot Line that are taken off and used along the Atlantic Wall. Yeah. So there are some aspects of different things that they are using and implementing in their own defenses. But no, it's not like, well, this was developed because of what we experienced in World War I. It's not like that at all. It's all kind of on the fly, trying to figure this out as they're going along.
Because that's my sense too. Because the thing I'm really starting to get more interested in is those prepared positions just behind, right? Because there's some throughout the villages, some of them depending on where you are, or just in behind. Right. And those definitely don't get talked about because, I mean, a lot of them are just overrun very quickly, which is a good thing. That, less and dying. But, it's you can see kind of what the Germans were planning. It's a fascinating one. But, what the influences are. So, but, the stuff, I forgot about the stuff coming from the Maginot Line. That they're really slapdashing a lot of that stuff.
Oh, yeah. There are a number of mortar Tobruk's along Omaha Beach and other parts, obviously, that have mortars taken from the Maginot Line, like the breech loading mortars and stuff like that. And then you have a number of guns like the Mac 31, which we just saw in my drawing, and also like the Darn machine gun, the Darn AA gun, which there's a photograph of one of those at WN 72.
Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking of there. No, I was thinking of something else. I was thinking about the museum in Bayeux, but it's a naval gun.
Oh, okay.
That was used for coastal defense. Yeah.
Right.
Same idea.
Right. So you get elements of other things, but it's not like, it's not like they're going off previous experiences or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and this is a question related to it, I think, because we're talking about it. Is the Maisie battery? Have you done any researching on that one at all?
I have not. That's something I haven't quite looked into yet. I have to go back and look at these things again, because that's one that I've heard about it a lot, but I personally have not like looked into it.
Yeah, it's late. It's late. Yeah, sorry, I can't talk anymore. It's more covering further down. It's in between Utah and Omaha.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it covers both. Well, I'm not really sure if it does much on the day.
That's the one that was uncovered not too long ago, right?
2004. Yeah, well, that was almost 20 years ago. Wow, doesn't feel like it.
I know, right?
Anyway, so that's not one I've seen pieces of it from a distance, but that was about it. I think we were pretty much got all the questions. I have a question about the 6th Airborne Division battalions, but I don't remember them all. That's not what we're talking about today, so that's a different show. But yes, one of them was the first Canberra, I can tell you that. So I don't know, you might not even have an answer. This might be a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
I've been throwing around an idea in my own head, and maybe for a video at some point later time, is I can't get past the Saving Private Ryan stuff because I grew up around the same time you did. That movie was like so defining, and my opinions have changed on it a ton. This might be kind of morbid, but people are like talking about Saving Private Ryan, how the veteran said this is what it was really like. This is the most accurate thing. All that stuff. And then I read accounts like that one video I did on this Stanley Bach that I talked about. He lands really in the middle of all of this. And his description is seems worse. Was the reality when it's at the hottest, was it worse than Saving Private Ryan?
Certain parts, yes. That's the thing too. It's like, looking at Omaha Beach as a whole, 5 miles long. If you want to talk about the very first minutes of when Company A of the 29th ID landed on Dog Green sector, because when they landed, the Germans let them come out to the water. The thing was with the Germans is that they had a certain mark where they knew to shoot. So it was like, once the Americans reach that spot, that's when they're open up. It wasn't just like, oh, they're just start shooting immediately. It's like they had the beach side, pretty much lined up where they wanted it to be. They'd have a range card that says this is this distance right here, and once you see them hit that distance, that's when you open fire. So when Company A landed at the lowest tide possible at 6:30 in the morning, those were the first guys to hit the beach, other than the tanks, because the tanks also hit before they did. But the actual infantry, Company A, landed, and it was 4-5 boats, I think. They let them come along on the beach, and then they opened fire once they reached a certain position, and that caught them completely off guard. And I think it was 83% were wiped out in that company.
Yeah.
So it's like that. Yeah, I mean, that is devastating. Now they wouldn't get shot immediately once the ramps went down. That happened later with like Company B and Company D and people like that, because they were already shooting at that point and bullets were flying everywhere. But for Company A, they actually did let them come along the beach at first and just walk up along, and then they just killed them all at that point, almost all of them at that point. So that would have been devastating, and in my opinion, almost worse than being shot in the boat.
Well, I mean, that's why I asked that question is because I read that doc. I can't remember this. I think he was in the Navy. I can't remember. Anyway, he describes his watching this happen, and it's just what he's seeing. And this goes on for hours. This isn't the movies. This isn't Longest Day. This isn't whatever, Big Red One. Pick any of the ones you want. And not just picking on Saving Private Ryan. I think they all do this. It's so sped up. Where some of these beaches, it takes forever. This goes on forever, and they're under artillery fire for hours. That's something that is so hard to grasp, and I think it's something that needs to be said.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you
own hell on earth, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, you want to talk about like how bad these these guys were getting it when it started. Later on, they were able to get off the beach and stuff like that. When it started, though, and it was around about like 11 when the beach masters of the 6th and the 7th said that the beach is closed. We're not having any more landings. And for a few hours on Omaha Beach, I think it was between like 10 and noon, there weren't any landings taking place because they said there are no more people landing. We can't get anyone off the beach. They didn't have more landings until finally people started to move off the beach. But during that time, it would have been bad because guys are getting killed, and it is a drawn out thing. It's not just 20 minutes like Saving Private Ryan. It is a lot of carnage drawn out for hours, like 2-3 hours at that point.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring up earlier the Navy thing about the beach being closed and saying Omaha if it fails. We kind of had an idea what that looked like because they literally did close the beach. It was closed for hours.
They wanted to see what the hell was going on. I haven't found anything where they were like, well, we need to stop. We need to call this off or anything like that. It was more like assess the situation and see what's going on.
Yeah, a few of them, as far as I know, they just diverted them further to the west, in my understanding. But this is for that one particular sector. But it's just something that sticks with me is it doesn't fit what you think. And I've read, some of the historians or writers, I should call them, these things, and it's just they don't seem to get that because they don't deal with the sources, which I think to me is the most important thing to do. But
it is, and the thing to consider though is that. And this is another thing that's, we deal with so much stuff that pisses people off, it seems. But, you can't always take a veteran's word at heart. I mean, these guys, memory is very unreliable. False memories are a real thing. I know Paul's talked about this. I've had other people talk about, but I've said this stuff to people and they look at me like I'm insane.
Yep.
And, but it's true. And, also when you're 80 years old, your mind is not going to be nearly as sharp, for something that happened almost 80 some years ago when you're like in your 80s or 90s or even 100 now. So it's always like it's interesting to talk to people that were actually there. Take what they say, though, with a grain of salt. Take what they say and compare that to actual documents and photographs that were done back then.
Well, I was just going to say my own experience. I've seen interviews where the interviewer is leading the person on and directing them to an answer they want, or they're so bad at interviewing they just distract them so much with stupid questions that they don't.
Right. Going back to Von Kusken,
Well,
leading them on.
This one was worse. The guy was asking a veteran of D-Day about the acronyms for the landing boats.
Like he's gonna know that.
Well, it's like, hey, look it up. Oh my god, that would drive me crazy. I'm like, you have this guy, he's giving you probably the worst day of his life because he got wounded on, I think, the day of or day after.
Right.
He wasn't in combat for long, and I'm like, you're asking him about what an LCI is? Like, come on, man. Anyway, that's just like drives me nuts. Like,
what type of jacket? What were you wearing, an M41 jacket or an M43 jacket? Yeah.
It's just anyway. So that was great. Thanks. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. Maybe sometime.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I want to have you back if you're willing to. I'd love to get more into some more details about some stuff because like I said, I have tons of questions and there's some more things I'd love to like dig in a little bit with you, and maybe I can, because I have some questions about that guy's account. It sticks with me, and I've been to that sector now, and I literally walked it, and then, so it's kind of sticking with me. So maybe you can have some insights for me.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, anytime.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on, and then especially if you after you go and get your thoughts when you come back, that would be cool too, to finally get this thing that you've been looking at for so long. Have your thoughts.
Yes, I got to get over there. So again, please, the link for the GoFundMe is in the description.
Yeah, it's down below. Check it out. Help them out.
Thank you.
You've got stuff on YouTube yourself, so go check that out as well. I'll link them as well after. But some of the stuff you did with Woody is fantastic. So I'm glad to get you on the channel, and we'll definitely get you back if you're up for it.
Thank you so much, sir. This has been a lot of fun, and just hit me up anytime. I love talking about this stuff. I know you do as well.
Oh yeah, well, it's hard to stop us. That's the problem. I got to cut myself off. I got better at it.
You just go for hours.
I'll never shut up. That's the problem. That's why I say to people, it's like, oh, you talk to a historian. I'm like, no, the problem is getting a historian to shut up, not to talk.
Yeah. True, man.
It's the truth. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next time. Look for details on when that'll be. Bye, everyone.